Okay, so here we go. All right. So let's see. So where are we right now? We are at, let's see, page 259. So if you're following along in the cover to cover read along of the Parinoma method, we are at the beginning of adaptations and holding patterns, and I'm going to read through characteristics of a balanced seventh hub. And so for anyone, I usually put this at the end of the video, but I'll put it up front, which is that if you have any comments, I'll answer any comment that is like any comments, any questions, I'll respond to anything. And if you have any thing that you want to share, one thing I think that's been working well is where folks have things that are personal that they want to share, they don't want to put in a public comment, sending me a DM at the Parinoma method on Instagram. So anyway, there's that. Onward. So I'm reading from, so we're nearing the end of part 2, and specifically we are in the adaptations and holding patterns. And as just a quick reminder, the adaptations and holding patterns are so in a given hub, there's a period of the initial development of the nervous system that corresponds with the qualities of the given hub. And so in each chapter dedicated to a hub, we explore the hub, we explore events and circumstances that can have like very strong interrupting and stressing impacts on the development of the hub. And then with the adaptations and holding patterns, we're looking to see, like how does that like manifest itself? And in the seventh hub, here we go. Look at me. That's kind of nuts, that hair. Yeah, I guess I just don't look at myself enough to like really download what's going on here. Look, you can see my cat. Oop. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going to see where this goes. I'm specifically only planning on reading. Oh, it's just this page, the characteristics of a balanced seventh hub. I don't know if I'll get into it. We'll see where this goes. I might also read the out of balance seventh hub because there's something that's coming up that I want to bring up that relates to this very specifically. So in some ways, talking about how a hub is when it is, we'll call it balanced. And by balanced, I mean has a strong capacity and is dynamic, is that it's like, okay, well, if we have adaptations in this hub, it's looking at what's possible as far as like how we can shift I'd call it like the manifestation of our lived experience, what it feels like it moves into this with practice. It like with this practice, it moves into having more balanced characteristics. And so as a result of that, the benefit is that the way life feels changes. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to read. And once again, this is page 259. Let's see. In the legend, so this is adaptations and holding patterns. So in the legend of the Gordian knot, a rope bound a chariot with an impossibly tangled knot. It was believed that the rightful ruler could release the chariot. The knot remained in place for hundreds of years until Alexander Great rode into town and, after inspecting the knot, simply cut it in half, releasing the chariot. Imagine how many people, from kings to commoners, contemplated that knot while it remained tangled for nearly 1,000 years. Yeah, it's interesting because, the reason I really love this I love this, it's funny because it's like the visualization of a tangle is, kind of one that is used differently as now as I talk about the Pareto method, but, in this, like, allegory, you have this gargantuan tangle, and it's kinda like, "Well, how would we untangle this?" And it's kind of a, like, pretty revolutionary thing where it's like, you just end it. You just gotta it's just and it's kinda like it's a little bit like Occam's razor. It's a little bit of, parsimony, the principle of parsimony, and it's just like this kind of simplicity. The simplicity and inconvenience of truth. I mean, we don't take it's like, it just goes to show that it's like the tangle is upholding it's upholding facets and aspects of, like, what we believe to be reality. So to just, to quickly release it, disorienting. Okay. So much of our education system attempts to shape our minds rather than teach us how to think for ourselves. So it's easy to get tied up in the impossible binds of what we learn. The interruptions in this seventh hub freeze our thinking and bind us with attachment to old ideas. The sharp blades of inquiry cut through the ancient knots that were tied long before we were born. To release ourselves from holding patterns, we slice through beliefs that seem true for many generations. Oh, that's some good writing there. Pat on the back every now and then. Yeah. So one thing when I was writing this, I thought a lot about my public school education. I'd gone to a Waldorf school for the first like 8 years, kindergarten through the end of seventh grade. And then I went to public school and and honestly, like, the thing is that there really wasn't a lot about teaching how to think. In fact, the only place where there was any like, kind of like, aspect of that was in my advanced placement classes, but in general, my classes were, like, learning information, like, memorizing information. And, in a sense, not even in a sense, it was just like it was kind of a formalized indoctrination. It was like I remember that the switch from going to a school that did involve a lot more in terms of a broader notion of knowing and connecting with things like nature and physical movement and crafts and storytelling and just like this much more. Yeah, I mean, and the thing was at the time I was really rebellious to it. So I was like, "Yeah, I don't know about this, it's not the real world." My whole thing, "This is not the real world." Um, 'Cause it wasn't about, yeah, I mean, honestly, it really wasn't about being employable. It was, like, a lot about, like, it's like everyone had to play the violin. It's like but the thing is with it, and to look at the world with curiosity and wonder, that was, like, taught in, like, the multiple intelligences, that things were valued beyond kind of the standard writing, reading, and arithmetic. Um And so, yeah, I mean, it's like realizing it's like what you're taught in school is really like pieces of information. It's like we're taught and it honestly hadn't really like maybe it had occurred to me intellectually, but as I explored it more, realizing like how much indoctrination was involved in like my high school education in the public school system in New Hampshire. And then when my little niece came during COVID and she was taking her classes online and I was listening to them, it was really like it was like the timing was so it was like listening to like who the teachers are, like their level of curiosity, that it's like really more like there's a right and there's a wrong, and it's like really disciplined. And their right isn't even like anything they've really seemed to explore. It's like a piece of information were told was right, and now they're like, this is right. You know, they were doing the Little Rock Nine, and on the side, I said to her, I said, "Ask your teacher why were the black children the ones who had to go to the white schools?" I'm like, "Why did it have to be that way?" And she just like without, like with like I think there was like a beat where she was like, "Oh shit, that's not really like the best question." And then her next thing was something that was like, "Well, the white schools had more resources." So it was giving the black children access to more resources. And like the fact that that's an answer, like that isn't like the beginning of more questions, more of like, whoa, wait, hold on. Why is that? Like just the fact that it's like, no, that's the answer. It's like the end of the discussion is the fact that you would go to the white schools because there's more resources there. So that like this is a bit of a spinning a yarn here on this, but one of the things in the seventh hub is its knowledge, but it's something very specific about knowledge, which is like it's almost like how your personal relationship with it, the mechanism by which you like of inquiry, of curiosity that that we explore information, the way we explore understanding of other people in the world. And one really common it's work, as has been discussed, it's work to think. So, the idea of finding someone that you're like, yeah, I kind of align with them, and then just agreeing with, being like, wow, they're really smart. So I think if they say something, it's probably right. And then there's the other side, which is like, well, these are the people that I belong with, and this is what they think. So it's like, and I don't really think I have a strong opinion about it. So I will just align with them because the thing that matters more to me is like my connection to the people I love and the people I care about. So there's places where this gets stuck, and not in a way where it's like vilifying people who are stuck, who like don't develop here, but just, I mean, part of it is understanding. Um, but also, I think one of the important things is that like the emotion and some of the lower hub energy that can like really back up like some of the holding patterns in this hub and make them louder and make them more aggressive, can actually make folks who have have more developed thinking on a matter like fearful to speak up or question themselves. And there's knowing that comes through, it's like you can have like a really like sort of big seventh hub, and if the lower hubs are underdeveloped, the knowledge is not coming through feeling, is coming through fear, is coming through lack of worthiness and the conditions to belong. So it's like even how we can know and understand things is going to be impacted by this foundational first four hubs. Relating with compassion, relating with the sense of like a self-originating sense of power, personal power, self-esteem, self-confidence that's emanating, that's not looking for validation and fearful of being invalidated by people if you're in disagreement. And then your own feelings, like how things feel to you, and that feeling being like your how a direct relationship with something feels rather than, suppression of it or just sort of agreement. I mean, it's been really painful, I would say for me, like in my experience of wanting to belong and my desire for connection, some really painful reconciliations I've had personally in my life have had to do with, and I think this is incredibly relatable, which is like what we, without like bringing a lot of consciousness to this dynamic of nuance of like needing to be ourselves and also needing to belong, that one can actually wind up like being a really strong pull for us, like, pulling away from being able to be ourselves. And it said, I think it's all even possibly referenced earlier in this book, that in a relationship, there's usually, I think it was Esther Perel who said, there's usually one person that's afraid of losing themselves, and there's another person who's afraid of losing the relationship. And I think that that's an example of like when you put a relationship together, you are exemplifying what is actually like an internal like conflict or paradox rather, within, sort of as two people, but that exists within a person to greater or lesser degrees, those two conflicting elements. So, okay, so characteristics of a balanced seventh hub: discerning. And discerning, it's like, so to me, the thing is like discerning, I would say, like not taking something just at face value, to consider something, contextualize it, curious, thoughtful, wise, and wise defined as understanding consequences. Questions, respects traditions, but sees how they evolve over time. I would probably say questioning. I feel like that could use a verb tense upgrade. Quickly analyzes and assimilates new information. Respects differences. Open-minded. Aware, both alert and calm. So this is a place where nervous system regulation is really an important part of this hub. So once again, the second hub really, like the thing is like being emotionally hijacked makes this hub, like emotion, like like a second hub that is, restricted, underdeveloped, lacks dynamism, is really like really at risk for being intellectually hijacked. And that's dangerous. We can be talked into doing dangerous things to ourselves and other people when our emotions are loaded. And if we don't know ourselves, we're particularly at risk for being able to be co-opted for by others to act in their interest. Knows it's not possible to know everything. So those are some of the characteristics of a balanced seventh hub. So as we've seen in the other hubs, the inflating and shrinking adaptations share the central underdevelopment within the hub, but express this in different ways. Balance in the seventh hub relates to inquiry and discernment and the ability to grasp and comprehend what is obscure. Imbalance in holding patterns range from the shrinking cynic who avoids broader contemplation to the inflating believer who lacks discernment, and accepts information without using the filter of judgment. And then characteristics of an out-of-balance hub is perfectionism, denial and avoidance, certainty, a belief system that does not change. So there's this rigidity, controlling to avoid, believes in one right way, tendency to generalize, distort, and erase to support their current worldview. And one of the things I'm going to call back to, because the next reading is going to be about the characteristics, the shrinking and inflating, or no, it's just going to be about the shrinking and inflating. So one of the things that's kind of like, I think worth pointing out here is intelligence, the definition of like, what is intelligence? And, especially with, and I think I've talked about this before on one of these, but there's like a million of them now. So there's that. But like the thing about intelligence is that it's like, it's one of those things like being smart. Like, what does it mean to be smart? It's like, does it mean like, so this notion of like, of what I was talking about, like in school, which is like knowing answers, knowing the right answers. That was like one of the things where I would get in trouble. Like I remember in college in a physics class, I solved a problem correctly by using a different methodology to get to the solution. And I remember being like, yeah, but like, hey, like I get it. And I get it. I get both sides. I get both sides of like it's like, look, we're trying to teach this methodology. Right. I mean, then like that's the point. But also the fact that it's like, look, it wasn't explicitly stated that that's the way that I'm supposed to arrive at it. So, whatever. But that's school, it's like really school. It's like, so it's not, it's not just like that's just bad. It's like, I get it. But there's a thing in academia in general, which is like studying the past. This kind of thing of like studying the past. And I think like one example I'd use here would be the difference between like studying and critiquing. So I'd call academia like almost like, in some forms, like not all of them, but there's like a version of academia which is just this assessment of the work of other people, versus this kind of creation of using the pieces of it to form like new ideas and new things. And so that like in academia and in even like sort of like the rarefied, art critics and cultural critics, it's just what it is. It's not, it's like it's like what it is it's actually, it's almost like watching a game versus playing on the field. And I know people who like, so for somebody who's like a music critic or somebody who studies music versus somebody who composes it. That somebody who wants to create music, which is like creating the new world, versus someone who is looking back and assessing what has been and sort of trying to understand it, and it's just two different things, you need both. You need the people who are watching and you need the people who are playing, as discussed in the previous sub chapters. But when it's but I think, like, one of the things is it's kinda like maybe you go to, like, what this might be going too nuts, but, like, you go to a professional sports game, and then maybe, like, you play in your backyard, you kick a ball around. So it's like you're kinda like, you're sort of in both. And maybe there's one where you're, like, sort of more practiced and more, like, better at it, but they're in kind of both. And I think when we're talking about adaptations in this hub, it's like either, things to create without the respect and even just respect, appreciation, even like study of those who came before and like gained all the yardage. Like there's something there to understand that. Like there's something, there really is something, like really important in terms of creation to respect what got us to this moment to be able to create the things we can create. And then, yeah, I mean, and then, for folks who are like watchers to like, if just like take out a paintbrush and just see what it's like to paint something. Like, and how that will change what the experience is like to critique or to evaluate something. To realize how hard it is to do it really well and to deepen an appreciation in that way. Like to enrich like a love of the study of something by trying to do it. I realize it's really hard to get the right colors. It's really hard to get, to like have an idea and then like make it come out like you want it to. And then even it's like, oh, maybe that's part of the process, is it kind of doesn't. And that maybe helps me understand how other artists, how artists operate. I don't know, but in this hub, when we're talking about knowledge and information and knowing, it's kind of like, there's this sort of like almost directionality where you have, sort of like progressives, who are looking towards a future state unrealized. Um, and then you're looking at, more like, I guess, conservatives who are looking at a past state and idealizing that, and where you have this kind of like notion of this future state as being just unequivocally better, and then having this notion of the past being unequivocally better. And like, obviously, neither of those, or maybe not obviously, can be completely true. It's respect for the past, optimism for the future. There like in like yogic studies, there's very specific direction for like the scholarly pursuits and the reading of those who came before you, and I think in religious and contemplative sort of traditions. And I didn't really, I think that up until the process of the creation of the Parinama method and the contents of this book, I hadn't really understood what it's like to commune with commune in this space of contemplation with people who've spent a lot of time thinking and being and creating and doing and like all, and living and feeling and working through and reconciling. And there was something that was like, I really was like this breakthrough of this, where it's like kind of the on the shoulders of giants kind of thing, because I don't know that there's, I'd say there's anything in the Parinoma method, which is, a really large tome here, that isn't inspired by something. I mean, certainly there isn't anything. I mean, even the fact it's like written language. I mean, even it's like, there's nothing in here. It's all of this is like this kind of continuation of all of these, like, of the minds of those who came before me. And even just like even like, even looking at this, like the bullet points here for each of the balanced and imbalanced hubs is the consideration of that, like every single thing was inspired by someone else. Reading a book, listening to a podcast, having a conversation, um, just that level of like this kind of connection, even things that were like sort of downloads of, in states of contemplation, meditation. I mean, the thing is, actually, one of the things that's just occurred to me is that every other hub has this kind of aspect of like it emanating from within, but it's like in the seventh hub, there's actually this kind of aspect of actually things coming into the system that are of high integrity. I just feel like downloads, and just I'd be woken up at 3 in the morning after having like inquiry, like a period of inquiry and contemplation, and then to have something that's like, oh, this is how this fits together, or this is what this is, or whatever. It just would come, that process. Very seventh hub, very electrical. If you know, you know. It's very intense. It's very intense. It's very intense. And if you're going through, and I will offer, if you are going through um, some of the ascending aspects of this that are, we'll call it electrifying, earth shattering, this is something I don't, it's, you're not alone. It's something, certainly reach out to me if you feel like you want to talk about this or you want to connect on it. I can't guarantee that I'll like to what extent that I will, but yeah, I can tell you, you're not like, yeah, there's some kind of offering. It's not fully articulated there. I don't know what it is. Okay. But anyway, so I'm going to wrap this up. And stop my, yeah. Okay. So that's it. So thank you for watching. And again, all comments, I respond to them. Thank you. I appreciate you. We've got the shrinking and inflating in terms of the adaptations in this hub. And then we're going to get to the holding patterns, which are assumptions, spiritual bypassing, and the shadow, which is absolute certainty. So get ready. All right. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.